Could everyone just let me know that come through okay for everyone?
Yeah, that's all good, Alex.
Brilliant, great. Thank you, Chris. So yeah, thank you uh, for the invitation to speak today. It's great to be here. As Chris mentioned, my name is Alex Jones. I'm a researcher at the Wales Centre for Public Policy. So for those of you who don't know who the WCPP are, so we're a policy research centre based in Cardiff University, and we're one of the UK's What Works centres. So we aim to kind of bridge that gap between research and policy by making evidence and expertise accessible so they can be actioned. The Wales Centre for Public Policy, we work across 3 programmes of work, so environment and net zero, community wellbeing, and tackling inequalities. And as Chris mentioned, so we've just recently wrapped up a piece of work looking at poverty stigma that sits under our tackling inequalities programme work, which I wanted to take the opportunity to speak to you today about. So just firstly, kind of a bit of context on how this research came to be. So back in 2022, the Wales Centre for Public Policy conducted a major review into poverty and social exclusion on behalf of the Welsh Government. And a key part of this review was lived experience, which highlighted the kind of mental health burden of being in poverty and the role of stigma in linking poverty and to poor mental health. So in part, thanks to this work, in 2024, the Child Poverty Strategy for Wales was published, and that highlighted tackling poverty stigma as one of the 5 key objectives under that strategy. And since then, the WCPP have been working to develop a programme of work to support Welsh Government and wider public services to take an evidence-informed approach to addressing and preventing and addressing poverty stigma. So, and a big part of this our work is our work in Swansea. So our aim in Swansea was to understand and learn from lived experience of poverty stigma locally, where it comes from, how it manifests in people's daily lives and their interactions with services, and how it feels and how it affects people. But also it was to gain insight into the role of public services in both producing and preventing poverty stigma, as well as capturing and building on what's already working at a local level to tackle poverty stigma in Swansea. We also wanted to understand what research evidence said about poverty stigma and learn from promising practices that have been conducted elsewhere. And then ultimately, we wanted to co-create evidence-informed actions for tackling poverty stigma and inform Swansea Council's poverty strategy and implementation plan, as well as the wider efforts to tackle poverty stigma. So to achieve this, our approach in Swansea consisted of community research to gather lived experience insight of how poverty stigma affects people, where it comes from, and community and kind of ideas for change. A review of international academic evidence on what works to prevent and address poverty stigma. And we also conducted a workshop with lived experience experts, policymakers, practitioners, and academics to bring various forms of evidence and insight together to co-create these actions for change. So the first part I want to talk about is kind of understanding the lived experience in Swansea. So we work closely with a group of community researchers who had lived experience, and they went out into the community and they conducted research with other people with experiences of poverty stigma. And this community research found that poverty stigma shaped people's daily lives in Swansea through systems, spaces, and relationships. So we heard how early experiences of poverty stigma can impact a person across their life course, with childhood experiences of poverty stigma creating lasting feelings of shame well into adult life. We also heard how comments and attitudes about poverty can be absorbed into people's thinking, where then they create internal shame and self-criticism, which can also affect a person's willingness to seek help. This can be compounded by social media and media pressure, with participants speaking of the kind of relentless comparison with those on other people on social media, creating feelings of inadequacy because of an inability to kind of participate in consumption culture. So this was especially prominent around holiday periods, where you would see people, like for Christmas example, posting pictures of all of the presents under the tree. while traditional media was seen to kind of stigmatize through negative portrayals of people living in poverty. So that's kind of reinforcing those harmful stereotypes. We also heard about the sacrifices parents would make to shield their children from experiencing poverty, such as skipping meals, but children often understand more than parents realize and would take on protective responses to stop their parents from feeling guilty. So for one example we heard of was in the case of school trips, where children would turn around and say to their parents, "Oh, I didn't want to go on the school trip anyway," after being told that they couldn't afford it. We also heard of systems designed to provide support can instead trap people, presenting them with difficult choices and kind of removing dignity and creating blame when they make logical decisions about how to maximize their income, so whether to look for work or not. And we also heard about how complex administrative processes become sources of trauma and dehumanization, with repetitive form filling creating a kind of re-traumatization process, because assessment processes force people to relive their experiences, and in some participants also talk about being asked to perform and their worst experiences, and then that creating shame about both their circumstances and the need for them to have to try and prove their circumstances. The physical environment of services can also send messages about a person's worth. Security guards in places such as job centres can make people feel like they're viewed as criminals or potentially violent rather than people seeking help. And we also heard about, sorry, if I just move on to the next slide. So kind of building on this insight into the lived experience in Swansea, we sought to strengthen our understanding of what works to tackle poverty stigma. So to do this, the WCPP commissioned the Poverty Alliance and the Scottish Poverty Inequality Research Unit to conduct a rapid evidence review into what works to prevent and tackle poverty stigma through public policy and practice. Through this review, we were able to identify 3 overarching themes of effective practice for preventing and tackling poverty stigma. So these were removing stigma from access to support, delivering services with dignity and respect, and also changing language, culture, and systems. So efforts to remove stigma associated with access and support for those in poverty focus on making processes more seamless, universal, and sensitive to the experiences of those seeking help. So universal provisions normalizes access, making support less visible and therefore less stigmatizing. So, for example, programs such as Poverty Proofing the School Day showed how initiatives like universal breakfast provision made it less likely that disadvantaged pupils would be singled out or excluded. Although universalization isn't always possible, so when that is the case and means testing or targeted intervention is necessary, the removal of or the simplification of application processes can also be destigmatizing. And this can be, one way this can be done is through automation, which can help to kind of remove that stigma and remove the need for people to reapply for different benefits. There was also evidence to suggest that co-location of services can help reduce poverty stigma. So one study found how individuals reported feeling less stigmatized and a greater sense of self-worth when they access support through existing trusted relationships, such as through GP referrals. And then, in addition to making support accessible, delivering services in ways that uphold dignity and respect is central to addressing and reducing poverty stigma. So cash-first approaches were identified as a key mechanism for upholding dignity and respect by enabling individuals to make the decisions that best meet the needs of their household and their families. And also, in turn, this kind of enhances agency and autonomy, thus again reducing stigma. Beyond financial support, services should be designed around these principles of dignity, empathy, and respect, ensuring that recipients feel valued rather than judged. So one piece of evidence came from community-based initiatives, and they demonstrated how you present a service can significantly influence how people experience it. So, for example, by designing facilities to resemble community spaces rather than traditional food banks, one independent food hub in the northeast of England helped to normalise access to that support. And finally, poverty awareness training can promote empathy and challenge assumptions. So one form of training is poverty simulation exercises, which can be delivered with the involvement of people with lived experience. And these have been shown to increase frontline staff's understanding and compassion, and can reduce negative judgments among practitioners.
2 minutes.
2 minutes, like
Spreadsheet that we use.
No,
that
sorry,
shows
Alex.
all
Oh,
the
sorry,
dates.
that was
someone else. Oh, right, okay.
someone
Okay.
else. Sorry.
You
We'll
chose.
read them to you now.
Yeah.
So, and then, but addressing poverty also requires not just changing service design and delivery, but also broader shifts in how we talk, and so our language, and also organizational culture and institutional systems. So a key element of this involves the meaningful engagement with people who have lived experience of poverty. This can ensure that services are attentive to how their offer is received and experienced by those users. It's also important to change how poverty and support is communicated. So by promoting alternative kind of non-stigmatizing language. An example of this includes the adoption of a rights-based approach, where, for example, in recognizing access to affordable housing as a human right, support can be reframed as an entitlement rather than a charitable act. And also in the case of food redistribution models, by emphasizing that the environmental benefits of the service, such as reducing food waste, that service can be further positioned to then kind of as a collective endeavor rather than a charitable intervention. So following this, the community research and then kind of the rapid evidence review of what works, we decided to hold 2 workshops last summer, which brought together the community researchers, policymakers and practitioners in Swansea to kind of identify ways of creating stigma-free policies and services in Swansea. So across these workshops, we drew on both the community research and the international evidence to generate ideas for change. And then participants were then asked to prioritise 2 or 3 actions for each of the 3 themes that were identified in the evidence review. So that was the removing stigma from access to support, delivering services with dignity and respect, and changing narratives, culture and systems. So through those 2 workshops, we were able to, there was 8 priority actions that were agreed on. So firstly, in terms of removing stigma from access to support, participants noted that enabling services to share information more effectively would reduce the need for individuals to repeat the same information, thus reducing the stress and the possibility of re-traumatization as a result of going through repeated assessments. And then the last action you can see at the bottom there was to invest in community spaces that offer multiple services. So it was believed that these kind of one-stop shops could bring services into a trusted, accessible locations. However, to do this, it was crucial that success is dependent on genuine service integration, not just putting services all together in one space, but looking at how they interact with one another as well. In order to deliver services with dignity and respect, participants called for a universally free poverty stigma training for professionals focused on service delivery and design to reduce bias, also improve understanding of lived experience and kind of shift practice towards listening and believing service users. Participants felt that this co-design process should be done with lived experience, and as with any kind of involvement of lived experience, there's a need to make sure that tokenism is avoided, and that those with lived experience are listened to and that their views are impactful. Secondly, services should be convenient and accessible. For example, providing welcoming physical environments and maintaining in-person access can improve accessibility and dignity, particularly for those experiencing digital exclusion. Thirdly, participants called for further exploration of ways of better supporting groups most likely to experience poverty stigma, such as asylum seekers and refugees who often face worklessness. In the case of asylum seekers and refugees, as a kind of systematic policy issue, this isn't something public services in Wales can address alone, but the participants felt that this is something that they could advocate alongside others to create change. And then finally, in order to change language, culture and systems, participants felt that greater involvement of people with lived experience in designing services would help ensure that policies and provision is better reflects people's needs and doesn't inadvertently reinforce stigma. And lastly, by simplifying and reframing language, ensuring that it is both non-judgmental and accessible, accessing services can become less intimidating, supporting, and can increase uptake of those services. So that's kind of a quick run through of that of our project. I'll just stop sharing, but I'll be happy to take any questions. And also, we have a full report from the community researchers that I can share with Chris that can be circulated afterwards, as well as our policy briefing. And it's also worth noting that as the Wales Centre for Public Policy, we're always looking to collaborate with local authorities to be able to help action this research and to support them in implementing these changes. So if that's something you think that the Wales Centre of Public Policy can help you with, then feel free to reach out to me. Thank you very much. I hope I kept the time okay, Chris.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Alex. That was really, really interesting. And yeah, really interesting as well to see the comparisons to the last webinar we did, like I mentioned at the start, with the Alliance for Dignified Food Support, and they touched on that that form filling in and that performative nature and on that judgment. Does anyone on the have any questions from the floor? Sian.
Hi, Alex. Thanks so much. That was really interesting. I wondered, it felt like you started off by working with individuals who were already in the community to get their feedback. And you mentioned that a lot of those people were either living or lived experience. How did you start to connect with those people initially, or was that something that was already set up before the project kind of began?
Yeah, so this is I didn't have kind of a time to go through the background overall, but this is this relationship with the community researchers is something that the centre has been building up for a long time, for a number of years. And as part of this programme of work, what previously to when I joined the centre, they set up the Poverty Stigma Insight Network in Swansea, which brought people together with lived experience to talk about the experiences of poverty stigma in Swansea, and to kind of facilitate and support that collaborative change. So through that relationship, and this goes back to my point about lack of making sure you avoid tokenism when working with lived experience individuals. So this was this wasn't a case of we just approached some individuals living and said, could you do some research? This was a relationship that was built over a significant amount of time, and through also our involvement as so the Wales Centre for Public Policy, in addition to setting up the Poverty Stigma Insight Network, has been facilitating that group and group meetings for a number of months. So that relationship was built up over a long time, and it was through that network then that the community researchers were approached, and it was agreed that they would conduct the research on behalf of us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think we can all sort of relate to that, the sort of need to reach groups that we might be sort of cognizant that we are not reaching, and their voices getting missed out from these conversations. Did your research meet all the demographics you wanted to, or were there specific groups you particularly struggled with? Or?
It's hard to say. I think with any research, there's you always concerned that, especially with an issue such as poverty stigma or poverty in general, you can sometimes tend to have a lot of the same voices around the table who are very passionate and want to help tackle that issue. But then it can be harder then to get kind of those external outside voices in. But I think what helped through this project is because the programme of work, which I can a little bit more information was shared in the report, which I can share with you, is this research in Swansea was only one piece of a wider body, a programme of work looking at poverty stigma more widely. And then through that, obviously through the Poverty Stigma Insight Network, as well as bringing together and through the workshops and working with practitioners and policymakers, we were able to kind of make sure that we had a diverse range of perspectives in the room when we were talking about creating these, co-creating these evidence-informed actions.
Real. Yeah, and then just to bring it back to food, there's a few things you pointed out on communication, having sort of campaigns for the right to certain things. So we previously went to a right to food commission from Lee Byrne, the local MP, and he's sort of calling for these five 5 things to address food, the right to food in the UK. So yeah, things like that are really important to support. And then there's the new, obviously we've got the new administration in Wales. You must be sort of encouraged by the cash first approach with the child poverty £10 a week pilot that they're planning to launch, and then the recent they've removed the limit cap on universal credit claimants for free secondary school meals. So I think that'll be going from September. So yeah, those sort of things must contribute to what you've just touched on there.
Yeah, definitely. And going back to kind of the cash first approach, and that's kind of embedded in this, the importance of choice. So I'm from a personal level. So my research background was looking at actually at food poverty and alternative food provision. So I'm really happy to be here today. And a lot of my research looked at kind of your local pantry models and kind of those alternative food provision services. And a big part of that is that element of choice and giving people the power to be able to go in and select the food that they want. And that one of the things that came up in the research is how those cash first approaches, could be maybe an alternative, destigmatizing rather, opposed to maybe like food parcels or food vouchers.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, there's plenty of people on this call that are doing more than that. We just that bringing choice and dignity to people. Yeah, we could talk for ages about this, Alex, but maybe we can have a catch up after we've spoken about this with partners and see if we can carry this conversation on at a later date. But yeah, really appreciate
definitely
your time today.
Thank you very
much. So yeah, no more questions, I take it. Anyone, feel free to jump in before we move on to the next person. Yeah, so next up is Vic Harper from the Bread and Butter Thing. They are a mobile food club up north, making nutritious food more accessible by taking it into the heart of asset-stripped communities, something we can all relate to, I think. Yeah, you've probably heard me banging on enough about the food ladder approach, and this is a project that really sort of embodies that approach and drives to deliver lasting change by being more than a food distribution service. But yeah, I will hand over to you, Vic, now.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for having me. I'm above a warehouse, so if you hear beeps and forklift trucks in the background, apologies. We are busy loading vans at the minute. I'm just going to share my screen. Bear with. Right, can you see that? Not quite as slick as Alex, but hopefully you've got it. Let me just make it big. Everybody see that? Yeah,
fantastic.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So I can't actually see very many of you. If you've got any questions, then either blurt them out as I'm chatting, or I'll canter through this and you can ask me some questions at the end. So the Bread and Butter Thing is an affordable food charity. As Chris says, we're now in 160 communities in 34 local authorities, which is 70 constituencies. We're only in England as we speak. We go from Kent, actually, we're down in Maidstone, all the way up to Northumberland. We go into Merseyside and into Lincolnshire. So quite a decent spread across England. And we work in areas where residents lack access to affordable food and are living in food insecurity. And, one of the things that Alex has just said is, pulling out that environmental piece. 95+% of the food that we get is donated. And last year we saved nearly 10,000 tonnes of food from going to waste, which is the equivalent of 21.4 million meals, which is quite a chunky amount to get in people's fridges. So I'll go into the model in a little bit more detail, but whilst food's the hook, we're not entirely about food. So we are supported in the community by lots of teams of amazing community volunteers that are largely members as well. And last year we benefited from 183,000 volunteering hours, which is fantastic. We also try and align the big brew time, which is in effect a chance to bring people together over a cup of tea and a custard cream, or in the weather like today, some juice and a can of pop or something in a nice lolly. But last year we provided 30,000 hot drinks, which is 30,000 conversations for folk. And then we want to wrap around additional support. So we're good at food, but other people are great at that additional support. So last year we worked with 206 partners, creating over 1,000 different visits into communities. And that's really about breaking down the engagement piece so that we're kind of putting these support services right in front of members at a time that they may be able to take that support, and kind of getting them to meet each other and making that kind of taking away the challenge of picking up the phone or going on the website when you're leading busy lives and you've got a lot going on. If we can align it with the food offer, then that feels like the engagement can work better for people. So our model is this. It's quite simple, but it's a bit of a beast. So we unlock food from suppliers, retailers, farms, manufacturers. We're in the supermarket supply chain. We are not in supermarkets themselves. So we're in distribution centres, and we unlock across the UK. So we will go anywhere that we can to get food that would be going to waste. So we're kind of preventing it largely going from AD, anaerobic digestion, and animal feed. Once it gets into our warehouses, so we use a fleet of third-party logistics to get it into our warehouses, and we've got our own set of vans too. Once it gets into our warehouses, every day, the guys downstairs are doing a remarkable job of packaging together that food. And we try and focus on giving 50% fruit and veg, 30% chill, and 20% cupboard stuff. So it's nutritional, it's feeling very different from kind of a general food bank offer. We take it out into communities and we look for those anchor institutions in the communities. So this could be the family hub, it could be the school, the church. We've got some adventure playgrounds, some scout huts, libraries. So we work with the partner that feels really inclusive and also wants to help prevent food insecurity. And we do the heavy lifting from the food side and they do the community piece. So it's very much a partnership. We get to the hub in our little vans. We've got the team of community volunteers. They're unloading the vans. They're taking it into the community centre, for example, and they're packing the bags for people. And then we've got big brew time and those additional services. So we create a weekly event for folk. In terms of being a member, it's free to become a member. There's no eligibility. So we choose the area really carefully with local stakeholders, councils, food network suppliers, looking at food deserts and food swamps and making sure that we've really picked the area and that we're not going to duplicate or displace any support that's already there. But then once we're set up, people can just text in with their first name, surname, the name of the hub that they want to join and their postcode. And we will text them every week to say, hey, we're coming to your hub on Tuesday. Would you like to shop? And they text back yes if they want. So we know how many people we're feeding at each venue every day. So this is our mission statement, which is a little bit bold. I'm not going to read it to you, but what we do is we have a weekly podcast that's called Slice of Bread and Butter. It's available wherever you want to find it. We also have an annual survey. Our annual survey last year had 9,000 responses. And what we do is we check that we are meeting all of this through listening really closely to our members. And we also then find out more about them and use that to influence policy at a national and a local level. So we've been involved in shaping of the CRF. We've been involved in the manifesto commitment to reduce the reliance on emergency food parcels. But we also work with local authorities, and we're also involved in the national endeavour for reducing food waste, which is in partnership with Number 10 Partnerships Unit, and working with DEFRA on the food strategy, which is now called the Good Food Cycle. So quite involved in that policy, using all of our intel to help shape what happens there. So I'm just going to run you through some bits. I think this really aligns nicely with what Alex was saying. It kind of brings to life through some of our data, some of the bits that Alex was saying, and we totally agree really in kind of how we, what the opportunities are and what the challenges are. So we recognise that poverty is increasingly experienced sustained pressure. Like if you think back to COVID, the world's kind of got harder over the last 5 years, and it doesn't look to get any better more recently. So we ask members about what they can afford, what they can't afford. So 75% of our members can manage a £20 unexpected cost without borrowing. So you kind of think, well, okay, they can afford 20 quid that they weren't expecting, but then it goes down to 33% when it's £100. So what we're seeing is that crisis responses quite often intervene too late. You can see from this picture that people's financial resilience is eroded, and you know, people don't have that. They're just really fragile financially, so that anything comes along can tip people into crisis, and we don't know what that necessarily looks like. And sadly, 50% of our members are borrowing to cover everyday essentials now. So it used to be that there was a holiday, a conservatory, we were doing up the house. Now it's just to put food on the table or just to put petrol in the car. And food really matters. You guys all know why food matters, but whilst it's essential, it's also really flexible in household budgets. So people start by restricting the diet, building in some more high fat, salt, sugar, maybe not getting the punnet of blueberries or the extra vegetable for Sunday dinner or whatever, or cutting down on the protein. So we're not having chicken, we're just having sausages now. And then it goes from there, and people will be having the same set of food every single week because they know that that budget, you know, is doable. They know that they can go to the supermarket and they can afford the list. And increasingly we're getting people saying, oh, I went and I couldn't afford that item anymore because, you know, it might be the coffee mate or the, you know, something else that's just tipping people over the edge. That means that they can't afford it. And everyone's got that little treat that's their favourite that they want to have, but they can't afford. So then we start seeing parents skipping meals and things like that. Now, what we do see from bread and butter is that people score us 7.4 out of 10 about worrying less about feeding the family when they use us, and 7.3 out of 10 for eating more fruit and veg. So we see that we're making a difference. We'd like to make more of a difference, but we're kind of combating that, you know, the economic pressures that everyone's facing right now. So, yeah. And we also see that we're kind of trying to prevent people going into crisis. So many people haven't used a food bank because they didn't want to, or they didn't quite meet the eligibility. But you can see from the financial slide that I showed you, you know, there's a lot of need. So we're operating in that preventative space on the food ladders upstream of the food bank, and we're trying to provide regular, predictable access to affordable, good quality food to reduce the sustained pressure and hopefully give people that bit of buffer. 8.4 was our score out of saving people money. Now the 63.7% is a really interesting stat. When I put that to my trustees, they were like, well, that's a bit rubbish. You know, what are we going to do about that? But when you look in the data, you'll see that the people that have 0 to 25 quid a month to spend on food are not saving money because they don't have that money to save in the first place. What is happening for them is they say that they are eating more healthily, that they are eating more food as a result of bread and butter. So for the first time in our data, we're really seeing that split, that there's some people that aren't saving through using the food clubs. They are now just eating better. They wouldn't have had that food. So we also see that kind of, you know, you'll be acutely aware of this, that health and poverty go hand in hand, and food insecurity is like a key link within those two things, I think. So of those people that have got 0 to 25 quid a month to spend on food, 50% of them are reporting poor mental health and 47% are reporting poor physical health. We also know that 14% are saying that their health is poor but do not have a diagnosed condition yet. So there's some people that are in a bread and butter membership that aren't yet kind of being recognised by the health system as being in poor health, but they are self-reporting that they are in poor health. What we then see also is that by giving people access to affordable food and taking away some of the stress about how you're going to feed the kids that week, and helping people save that bit of money, we're seeing that even when people do have a diagnosed long-term health condition, 26% are saying that their physical health has improved because of bread and butter, and 43% because of improved their well-being, and that goes up if you've not got the health condition. So it's indicating that broader preventative benefit, and what we're trying to do is make sure that we're really linking in those health services on top of this to say, right, we've got people in a place that are thinking about their health, they're feeling like their health's a bit better. How do we supercharge that? By layering in the social prescribing, some of the other stuff like the blood pressure checks, etc., so that the community health support is accessing around the bread and butter thing. And then social participation. People can be super time poor. We have people that shop with us that have 3 jobs and 3 kids and are just running in and out, and they just need to grab their food. But then we also have people that have come and make friends and really want to lean in, and it's the only time that they're getting out of the house that week. And so it's, you know, it's like we will have people at different levels of that. But we score 9 out of 10 for people feeling welcome at Bread and Butter. There is no stigma. Everybody is welcome. And people actually say that they make their friends at Bread and Butter rather than being friends with their neighbours, because they've found their people. They thought that they were on their own, and now they've got a community that they of interest that they associate with. 7 out of 10 is our score for being like people feeling more involved in their community. And 9 out of 10 is our score for community benefit. And I think that quote just kind of says it all for us. It actually made the team cry when they read it, because it shows the very real difference that, you know, single actions can make for people. And so just finally, really to wrap up, you know, we see ourselves as that preventative buffer with a middle stripe. We're looking at food clubs acting as preventative infrastructure, but you know, we want to fit with those partner services, have that positive, meaningful engagement, and wrap around the existing systems, because we need to, like, we're not the answer. None of this is the answer on its own. We need to get the systems right. But while we can add value to those, that's kind of what we would look to do. So thanks very much for listening. I'll answer any questions in a mo, and I'm just going to show you a few photos from our hubs. Just because you're not at one, but they're just full of joy. So I thought it was a nice thing to end on.
Definitely.
I will stop sharing.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you, Vic. Does anybody have any questions, Vic? I really, enjoyed seeing the similarities there with the wraparound, and how Alex mentioned that the one-stop shop was so important, and then you've just shown how you're delivering that, especially with the community health checkups as well. I think that's really important. Tim, do you want
to? Thanks so much, Vic. That was really insightful. Great to see how it's more than just food, and the sort of the community that's been built around it. Just going to ask, where does your funding come from? What's like the funding streams that you rely upon? I'm sure all of those vehicles, you know, is quite expensive, and warehouses and stuff.
Yeah. So we've got 2 warehouses, and we've got a fleet of around 35 vans, and then we work with third-party logistics. In terms of funding, we get seed funding to move into an area. So that's generally from the local authority, can be from housing associations, but it's the kind of this local stakeholder that recognises the need for us to move in. So kind of quite a lot of local authorities are looking at crisis and resilience fund at the minute, and kind of seeing about the resilience element. And then once we've moved into an area, people pay for their shopping. It's not a donation, so people pay £8.50 for a weekly shop with us. And so all of those £8.50s add up quite a bit. We've held our price for a long time, and are still continuing to hold our price despite external kind of fuel pressures and all of, you know, just inflation continually going up. So the first time last year, we also employed a fundraiser, and his job is to go out and kind of like be that middle stripe, but it's kind of a mixture of stakeholder funding. Oh, and we've got some comment relief funding as well.
Fantastic.
So
thank you.
A mixture, but you know, we are aspiring to be as sustainable as possible from both a food perspective, in that we don't pay for hardly any food, and if we do, we just match animal feed or anaerobic digestion costs. So we're not commercializing the sector. It's really important for us at our scale that we're not then going to the farmer and saying, right, let's do another layer where we've kind of got redistribution and there's rates attached to that, because we'll never keep that up. And if we get different governments and, you know, different prime ministers, which is very topical, we just don't know what that future looks like. So making sure that we've got a long-term sustainable model is like key for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's really useful. So for the £8.50, do you estimate how much it sort of worth that the members receive?
Yeah, so it varies week to week because we're unlocking surplus, so we don't make any promises about what's in the bags that week. But that kind of helps with diet diversity, because people are getting celeriac one week and blueberries the next week. I was at a hub yesterday and there was about 10 different types of fruit and veg that we were giving out, fresh fish. loads of different types of bread and cereal and stuff. So like quite a varied option for people. We would say publicly that people save around about 25 quid a week. It's more than that, but someone might not want the celeriac, they might pass it on to the neighbour. Someone might be yellow sticker shopping constantly, and then that doesn't, like, how are we going to match to that? We did some basket comparisons last year. We did 24 across the year, so 2 per month, and they came out with an average of a £36 saving. So in the 40s, knock off the 850, landed with 36 quid. So we're confident with the saving, but we wouldn't kind of like go out and try and over-egg it, because we don't want people to be disappointed, and £8.50 is still a lot of money when you've not got money.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That's really helpful.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Just conscious of time, but it's really go on, Owen.
So I was just going to ask, that's quite an impressive survey size that you do every year for your annual survey. Are those, like, do you publish reports of those statistics that we could reference while trying to sort of like lobby for policy change and stuff?
Yeah, so we've got some of that on our website. Some of it we do quite specifically to feed directly into DWP and exactly the policy that they're looking at. So we wouldn't necessarily publish all of that because it's got a real clear angle on. But if you wanted to chat outside of this and you needed some data, then we're dead happy to share with people.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
I can pop my email in the chat, and then anyone can get in touch if you're interested.
Well, I just spotted in the chat, Julie said that they wish that we had the same thing in Blaen y Gwent. So you're just in England at the moment. I mean, if you were to come to Wales, what would need to happen for that?
So Wales, depending on where it is in Wales, Wales could be quite easy for us to serve. We'd need to kind of have a local conversation with the local council or stakeholders or kind of the network, whoever's leading the food agenda in that area. Like I say, we do need a bit of funding to get us going. So it would just be picking up those conversations to work out what's feasible. But definitely worth exploring if people are interested.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be some people excited to follow up that conversation at a later date. So really appreciate your time today, Vic. That was incredibly useful. Yeah, okay, so we'll just pop on now to the next speaker. If I can introduce Tom Adescott from the award-winning Down to Zero project in Rhondda Cynon Taf, making locally grown veg boxes more accessible for communities. Tom and the team are demonstrating that with the help of the community, responsibly grown local produce is not just for the privileged. So handing over to you, Tom, and thanks for joining us. I'm sure you'd rather be watering the vegetables than sat here, but I appreciate your time.
No problem. Diolch, Chris. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you everybody for inviting me to you today. I'll try and share as much as I can as quickly as possible. But please feel free to ask any questions at the end. I'm aware that we're kind of sharing a journey over the last 3 years and kind of skimming over that as well. So just very quickly, Down to Zero are a subsidiary of Cynon Taf Community Housing Group. Some of you might know who that are on the call. They're a traditional landlord based in Rhondda Cynon Taf, and what that tends to mean is it's a smaller sized landlord compared to some of your bigger ones, with roughly 2,000 properties across Rhondda Cynon Taf altogether. So Down to Zero is a community benefit society in its own right, and it's a registered not-for-profit community benefit society. We work with people, tenants and wider local communities to reduce the impacts of climate change, and that includes growing healthy, affordable food to environmental restoration and enhancement. And we're going to look at that today in terms of what we do in this area and the things we do as a team to try and enable that. We work with the local community, schools and community groups through providing local employment, training and volunteering opportunities. Seeing as this is kind of a food connection and participation network, I thought I'd share some quotes from Sustainable Places book by Adamson and Mark Lang. It's a fantastic book. I'd highly recommend reading. But it starts essentially in terms of food being the cornerstone an essential cornerstone of culture. A relationship with food goes well beyond the instinctual consumption that keeps us alive. It is intrinsically linked and intertwined with our identities, heritage, religion, statuses, connection, memories and values. And that has been a key ethos really in terms of what we've been doing at Down to Zero. When we talk about asset-based community development, when we talk about co-production, you know, those assets, those networks, those connections, those gifts and skills are really all important, and it's evident within the good food movement. Another quote that goes on: food systems hold great potential for positive change. That is why the majority of us are on this call. That's what we're working towards. They are key to mitigating climate change and improve the livelihoods of producers and consumers. Again, we're talking about capacity building and community building here, and a key aspect of that is moving people from consumers into producers, and it's never ever more visible really than in food. The book continues to go on, and it basically says, although changes are not straightforward due to significant political legislation, behavioural lock-ins, place-based level is the most appropriate starting point for community food. And that's kind of where we started at Down to Zero really. We had a massive sort of co-design session. We engaged around 150 different people and tenants back in 2020, 2021. We had strong conversations following on from Storm Dennis, following on from sort of COVID lockdown in terms of what people were like. Lots of people identified at the time they wanted to be more back outdoors. They wanted to be growing food, they wanted to be connecting with local food and different things as well. Bear me a second, PowerPoint. So where do we start? Down to Zero established in August 2022. And during that period we signed a 10-year lease with an organisation called Kennin Renewables based in Rhondda Taff, and this was our site when we started. It was an empty greenfield site, 1.8 acres altogether. And we got staff from the Housing Association together, we got lots of people from the local communities together to essentially just get the place started. Fast forward to 2025, this is a photo taken from September 2025, and this is kind of what we've established on this piece of land. Now a lot of work has gone into that. You can see in the right hand corner we've got wellbeing cabin, we've got storage areas for our tractor, we've got large scale polytunnels for operational growing, and we've got water tanks to ensure we can water appropriately. Very, very needed in times of weathers and stuff like this. And essentially we work with lots of different people across this site based in Pontyclean, Rhondda Taff. So just some photos I'm going to share with you of how it works. Some of you might recognize some of the faces within these photos. So we got children and young people on the left hand side working with one of our partners, Brincannon Strategy at the time. And then we've got some training which is being run by Social Farms and Gardens in the second picture, which involves our volunteers, community members and tenants from Taff Community Housing Group. Some of the young people we're working with from Ysgol Gyfun Cwm Rhondda, they come quite regularly to our site. We do have other schools come along as well. So it is also supporting that kind of low-level skill development in terms of outspace growing, particularly useful for young people where I suppose traditional school settings is not as appropriate, I suppose, as maybe alternative outdoor educational settings. A couple of photos in terms of the amount of food we grow. So one of the key things that we did identify was when we were establishing this work, we didn't want to step on the toes of food banks. We didn't want to step on the toes of food pantries. We wanted that kind of intermediary aspect element. So we thought it would have been probably not the right thing to do from a community development perspective, really, to establish another food pantry, particularly when there was so many already operating with the local community. But what we decided, we would working with people, we grow food at source on a large scale as possibly as we can. We'd sell that food as part of a sustainable income at affordable prices or reasonably affordable prices, and any excess that we'd have we would donate to local people. A lot of the volunteers get free food from us, or we would donate it then to local food banks, local food pantries, etc, etc. So just to give you a bit of a context in terms of how much food is grown, this is from most recently in June. There are 6 items that are going within the Lush box which are based from site. So to put that into context, there is only 6% of farms in Wales which are growing doing horticulture. So there is a very, very low amount of fresh fruit and veg that is actually created in Wales and is used within Wales. So for us to be turning that amount of sort of regenerative, non-sprayed, non-pesticides, essentially organically grown food, and delivering that out to community members or to local people then with a low carbon electric vehicle is quite a, it's quite a sustainable shift in terms of sustainability work. We do try and support in terms of the poverty mitigation as well. This is a bit of our work from our Christmas lush box. So what we do is every year we run an initiative called Give the Gift of Fresh Fruit and Veg this Christmas. We run bumper boxes, as you can see, which are costed at £17 a box for a 2-week period. And what we do, we give consumers the opportunity to round up to £20. And every time they round up to £20 then, we donate a lush box or one of our veg boxes to either a local person in need or to the local food bank. So in 2024 we worked with Pontypridd Food Bank. I think we give 35 boxes to the local Pontypridd Food Bank, 15 then to Taff Community Housing Tenants in Need. And in 2025 we worked with the Taff Ely Food Bank. We give 25 boxes to Taff Ely Food Bank and 15 again to tenants in need through Taff Community Housing Group. We have a bit of fun while we're doing it as well. It's really important from a community development perspective to have a bit of fun. So Kevin, one of our staff members, dressed up as Santa Claus as he was delivering the veg boxes across from the Taff. And it's important as well as you said, from the Bread and Butter Foundation, there is the spot about food deserts, so actually getting fresh fruit and food out to derelict communities is really, really important. And again, there's a photo here in terms of doing beekeeping and skill training with all of those there are tenants from Taff Community Housing Group. So this was our year from 2024-2025. We engaged with 170 people. That doesn't include the partnership work that we do. We had over 100 volunteers, 34 which were regular volunteers. Regular volunteers we count as anything more than 7 hours a month. 4 of our volunteers moved into employment, 7 received food hygiene qualifications. There was over 7,000 voluntary hours and around £150,000 of in-kind match funding arising from that. One of the things I'm going to move on to talking about is about facilitating community ownership and the opportunities within community ownership for food growing and different things as well. And during that year, we brought 27 acres of wetlands and woodlands into community ownership. So fast forward to last year, we engaged 180 people, 44 regular volunteers, where regular volunteers went up. We distributed 230 boxes of food across RCT. That's equivalent to about 2.4 tonnes of sustainable food to local people. So that's not food that we've essentially taken from the supermarkets, etc. This is essentially food that we have grown on our site with volunteers in a sort of co-productive process. We've saved over 105 tonnes of CO2 equivalents compared to 94 last year, and we've had 5,600 voluntary hours this year. And I just want to touch on that really. If you compare it to 24-25, our voluntary hours has gone down. And naturally, when we kind of look at outcomes or we look at indicators, we say, oh, well, the voluntary hours has gone down. That's not great, but that is not the case in other process. A lot of people we work with move into employment, and that is a key outcome. So where that voluntary hours have gone down, it tends to mean that people who've been volunteering most regular have gone into employment. So while it looks like it's gone down, it is a more positive outcome from a sustainability perspective. From a capacity building, network and connecting aspect, we host Men's Shed, Pontyclean and Think Creatively on our site. Men's Sheds, Pontyclean have about 48 regular members attending the site, engaging in, creating different things through woodwork, so skill-based training and tackling loneliness and isolation as well. And Think Creatively are a Welsh language organisation that do arts and crafts and different stuff on site. We support capacity building for Cwmbach Community Wetlands Limited. I will touch on that more recently. We're a strategic member of RCT Climate Action Network and a strategic member of the RCT Food Partnership. We've supported the county's Sustainable Food Places Awards, bronze and silver, quite recently as well. Following on from the work you've done, Chris, really in Blaen and Gwent with Ty Carlon and the food partnership up there, we are now working with Rhondda Cynon County Borough Council and the Resilient Family side, where we'll be delivering 40 fruit and veg boxes per week to Flying Start families. So it's quite similar to the Greengrocer initiative that you were running. Again, if we're unable to source it from site, we do use local markets to source our produce as well, so it keeps that sort of circular pound in the local area. We're featured in Welsh Government's community food strategy as well. So I'm just going to move on quickly in terms of land and community ownership, and I think this was something which has arisen massively in Rhondda Cynon and it's come essentially from a desire for alternative economic approaches, where people are a little bit frustrated in terms of the extractive model that's happening at the moment. And we've seen a rise in terms of organisations like Friends of Graig Woods, who have recently purchased land up in Pontypridd area, Tir Pontypridd again, who have sort of a community benefit society that have shaped to bring land into community ownership, and other organisations like Cynon Valley Organics and Meadow Street. So one of the key things we've done at Down to Zero is enabling the community ownership of 27 acres of wetlands and woodlands. This has been a large piece of work that we've had to work on, but we're very, very proud to make this happen. Cumbach Wetlands is an 11-hectare site, so roughly 27 acres, and is set in an area where housing and industrial activity dominates. Basically, it's a rare surviving wetland in the middle of the Aberdare community. There's Cumbach on the one side, Aberdare on the north side, and Aberama and those areas on the left-hand side. It's predominantly a wetland site with marshy grassland, open water, swamp, semi-improved grassland, woodland and scrub. And it forms its boundary with the Avon Cynon as well. So just some pictures for you so you can see the kind of land site we're operating at. We're very proud of this piece of work. Some of the biodiversities, we're looking at a kingfisher there, butterflies, there's otters within the river and on the site as well within the wetlands, so it's something we're really, really proud of. This is an important photo as well, because I just want to touch on some of the community capacity building and development work that's gone on. Within this photo is myself from Down to Zero. We have the community representation with Beth and Jenkins and Neil Robleski, who are volunteers of both Cumbach Community Wetlands as the community benefit society itself, but delivering activities within the wetland site themselves as well. We have Oriel Miller on the right hand side, who's the Chief Executive of Cynon Community Housing Group, and we have Vicky Howells, who's the MS for Cynon and Merthyr currently. And it's really important that I share that, really, because it talks, I'm going to talk a little bit about capacity building and co-production. And you can see what we are looking at here. So you got on the left hand side your citizen community-led action, and on your right hand side the organisations and collaboration. And this is why we're particularly proud of this approach, because we are sat right there in the middle where people and professionals work with people who have lived experience in the local area. So how did it happen? Community members came together during lockdown, during COVID. People wanted to get outside. They identified this piece of area as an outstanding natural place that they wanted to safeguard. They set up an organisation. They ran a community share offer, which was unfortunately unsuccessful. Now they did raise about £6,000 to £7,000, which is not, which is a success in its own right, but it fell well short of the £80,000 mark. And that does go back to really the conversations in terms of the kind of areas of economic deprivation we live in. So Down to Zero worked with Cumbach Community Wetlands then. We ended up purchasing the wetlands for £80,000, and that was thanks to funding from Cynon Community Housing Group and Pen y Cymoedd Community Fund. What we didn't want to do was disable the local community or stand on their toes, so we were keen to enable that community ownership. So we worked with the group to establish a 25-year lease on the site. So Cumbach Community Wetlands have a 25-year lease on the site, and within that lease we have community benefits and environmental restoration enshrined within it. So what we've actually got is, if we were ever to dispose of that and get rid of it, it would be first refusal to Cumbach Community Wetlands, and what that does is ensure really that it stays within community ownership. We've recently, we've been supporting ongoing capacity building of both the actual group themselves, and we've been recently successful with a £220,000 grant from the Heritage Lottery Fund. And the key aspect there then is improving green spaces on the wetlands. So that's going to include sustainable path development. It's going to include pontoons and pathways for people to access the wetlands on site. So you talked about participation earlier. Alex talked about in terms of tokenism and different things and where we are. And we're really proud to be sitting between sort of number 6 and 8 on that kind of ladder. So somewhere between partnership and citizen control and trying to enable that citizen control. If we think about it within a context of community capacity building, what essentially we've done is we've essentially moved finance available to the community members to access that as best as possible. We're building on that now, so we're offering community skill development in the local area as well. One of the key things we want to do is develop a paths maintenance group, a little bit like they do in Treherbert in Welcome to Woods area, and we're offering level 1 qualifications to the local community who want to come forward and develop their skills in environmental restoration. This is in partnership with Carnivale Organics. So how do we do it? This is shrined in what a lot of you as professionals and practitioners in the area would do. We started with people-centered and strength-based approaches, and they're quite intertwined really. So your unconditional positive regard, having, you know, genuineness or empathy, and we make sure really from a staff perspective that it is strength-based. We do focus on the skills, gifts, assets, the knowledge, the networks, and we are solution-focused as well. One thing we do say when we do work with communities, very often we can get caught up in some of that, you know, there's a lot around trauma-informed practices, etc., and you can get caught up in that kind of drama triangle aspect. So one of the things we do say is to need to be awareness of transference and motion, you know, keep yourself safe in terms of those boundaries. And when we've focused then in terms of flipping that narrative through you removing yourself from that and developing the empowerment triangle, and it's kind of the way we work. One thing we've taken in terms of a step further in terms of when we do our volunteer and our skill building is something called scaffolding, and I'm just going to share it with you very quickly, and that is about building the right conditions for people and volunteer development. So if you're unfamiliar with the drama triangle, lots of us move into community development work or working within communities because we want to help. And it's quite easy to get trapped into that rescue mode then in terms of when is help, not help, and when, or, you know, what is the right help. And it's something we're very aware of. A good colleague of mine, which some of you will know very well on the call, Paul Stepsack, he's phrased this as being more Alfred rather than being more Batman when you're working with communities, and it does stick with people. So we try and flip that drama triangle when we're working with local communities, and we try and flip it to an empowerment triangle where we focus on the creator, the challenger, and the coach. And the key aspect is, you know, we kind of identify everybody has something to play, everybody has something to give, and we want to get to that point where we're all creators and we're all responsible for sharing that knowledge and that work. And this is never more really important than when we're working on with volunteers across those different sites, whether that's growing food or whether that's, you know, environmental restoration. And it's a process called scaffolding, and it was developed by Zygotsky in 1978. And it's basically about the difference a learner can do without help and what they can do with the guidance and encouragement of a skilled partner. And that's kind of what I try to aim to get across with staff, is the skilled partner at Down to Zero is them. And it's supporting that kind of knowledge transfer and that independence. Exactly like I said earlier, moving people from being the consumer to the producer. And yeah, kind of covered that. So this slide again is from the Co-Production Network for Wales, and this is kind of what we try and deliver through Down to Zero. It's about being appreciated and acknowledged within the community, working to the strengths of what we have within the organisation. So one of our staff was a key grower, one of them was a beekeeper, and we've utilised those skills really to bring people on the journey and work with us. It's about focusing on that equal voice, the equal plaudits, something we're very much trying to do in terms of the community ownership and the work with Cumbach Community Wetlands. And what I would do just to finish off, very much like the last couple, is about talking about the volunteer voices, because very often we can get focused on some of the bigger stuff, but the outcomes are really important for local people as well. What's great about volunteering with Down to Zero is the positive benefits of my mental health, of working with others, meeting new friends and getting regular exercise. It's given me a purpose in life and has greatly improved my mental and general health. I've learned about the benefits of horticulture, growing your own food. I'm much more aware of my carbon footprint, and I've learned how to recycle energy and water. So a couple of photos. it's really important we celebrate success as we're going along as well. Working with Down to Zero gets me out the house and gives me fresh air. I really enjoy the company and meet different people. The people are kind and funny. The physical work gives exercise and opportunity to reflect and think things over. And I think that kind of emphasises the strength of the networks and the connections we've got as a company, but also as a community of volunteers and local people as well. Just some photos to finish. And that brings the end to the presentation, and I'm really open, to your questions, so please ask them and I'll try and answer as best as I can. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, Tom. That was fantastic, really impressive. I love that before and after photo you started with. It's just, yeah, such an incredible achievement. Yeah, and really liked your approach to co-production, and I think that's quite a rare thing to see, so how much thought and how well worked out that has been put into, and then the that foundational approach you're taking with supporting the local economy and food production. We know the Welsh horticulture sector is nowhere near where it needs to be, and this just goes to show that, like, even in the Welsh valleys you can produce 2.4 tons of food and get it to where it's needed, which is really exciting project to hear about and see. Does anybody have any questions for Tom? I thought Susie dropped off, might be a thing. I just got a quick one then. I quite like the children go into the project as well, and that sort of chimes in with our Not In Miss Out project with local education about kids that might not fit mainstream education. Is the site quite isolated? Is it hard to get to? Or how do you get people on?
It is, and it's one thing we've had to really think about, really, in terms of it. Between the two sites, one is the wetlands are much more connected and easily accessible for people, but our Pontyclean site is a bit more isolated. It's just off the M4, but is only really accessible via car. So one of the things we've done is we've identified that, and we got a grant in from the National Lottery to get an electric vehicle, which is able to carry volunteers back and forth to site and support people to get back and forth to site. Sustainability in terms of engagement is probably not the right fit long term, but it was always around a trial site in terms of developing our skills and knowledge going through this process. One of the key challenges in terms of Cynataff and the homes across the area is they're very pepper potted, so we don't have kind of big areas where we can establish this kind of growing thing, which might be possible for more the bigger housing associations where they kind of got the estates and stuff.
Yeah. All right, brilliant. Thank you. I've got a few things to pick your brains about, but I have to pick it up after the call, I'm afraid, but because we need to move on now to our next one. Next up is Matthew Proud from Queen of Greens. Thanks, Matthew. I know you've had a busy morning. Really appreciate you jumping on. So Queen of Greens is a social enterprise mobile greengrocer in the Liverpool area, running a bus-like service. Bringing fresh produce where people want or need it, all around Liverpool. So to explain more, if I hand over to Matthew, it's all yours.
Hi everyone. As Chris said, we're a social enterprise delivering fresh produce to people where they need it most. Our main target is like food deserts and situations where people don't have good access to healthy food. A short little bit about us. Obviously, we set up in November 22. We're a small team of 4 drivers and myself. I run Queen of Greens, and then we have a parent company called Alchemic Kitchen, which is a CIC. We were put together by 3 different companies. It's Alchemic Kitchen, Feeding Liverpool, and Food Rise. But more onto what we actually do. We basically purchase fruit and veg from the local wholesale market and sell it on to people at an accessible price. So we try and keep it low, or as close to low as we can. Basically, the only profit we make is to fuel the bus, and the rest is kind of dependent on funding we get in. So, sorry, I did have a presentation. I have left it at my house, so it's kind of all come from the top of my head. Like Chris said, I've had a bit of a hectic morning. Yeah. One of the main things we do, we work with a company called Alexandra Rose. It's a charity. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but they basically give out vouchers to people with young children or people struggling with food insecurity. And we go out to roughly 15 sites and take just Alexandra Rose vouchers. These vouchers are equivalent of £1, and it just enables people to actually get produce. A lot of the people that use these schemes are single parents, young parents, asylum seekers, refugees. So a lot of people you see having food insecurities in general. So that's why we teamed up with Alexandra Rose to try and sort that out. In terms of the Green and Greens itself, we are currently looking to expand. We have 2 buses that go out to stops, and recently, about a month and a half ago, we've started setting up stalls in hospitals because we became very aware that hospitals need better access to healthy food. And a lot of the staff and the patients are very, very thankful for us showing up and giving them the opportunity to purchase healthy food. And yeah, honestly, I don't have much more to say off the top of my head, unfortunately.
Yeah,
but
no, I got
questions you've got, feel free.
Yeah, so Matt, so how many stops do you go around in total with those 2 buses?
Currently, we are running 1 bus. The second one is due to set up at the end of September. It's a local one, so we currently do roughly 20 stops, which we are looking to expand to about 35 in, what's the month now? Middle of August, so about a month and a half. So
how did you?
Liverpool mainly, and we're looking to spread out to Knowsley as well.
And how do you decide where you stop? Like, do you get requested to go to certain places, or what?
Yeah, we get a lot of requests in, and we have to look at basically the location where it is, mainly because we don't want to compete with any small local shops that are selling fresh fruit and veg. We don't want to damage what they're doing. So we have to consider all the local aspects to it, and then generally what the need actually is. If there's a Tesco down the road, we try and avoid it because we'd generally be going for 1 or 2 people, which is what we need to try and avoid. A lot of where we go is like children's centres, asylum centres, and we go to a lot of sheltered accommodation because there's a big issue when it comes to mobility in those kind of places. So the fact that we just stop there to give them the opportunity without having to get a taxi down to the shop or
Yeah, definitely. And then that sort of, when you're picking up from the wholesalers, are you able to are you passing that on at cost, or are you subsidizing it through grants, or how does that work, the pricing structure?
So a lot of it we pass on at cost or very, very slightly above cost, mainly to cover fuel. We do get subsidized by different funders. We've recently done a Bridging the Gap fund, which is just about ended, which was sourced by Sustain. And that was to try and promote organic fruit and veg on the bus. So that was majorly subsidized by that, just to try and bring the cost of organic food down. And there is a report on that on the Sustain website if anybody wants to check it out. It was released about 2 months ago.
And was that organic produce from the same wholesalers, or did you have to go from
No,
different
that came
supplies?
from Organic North.
Right. Oh yeah, no. Amazing. And so how many people would you say how many customers do you have a week? Do you have consistent customer base, or does it fluctuate? And
It does fluctuate a fair bit. Obviously, it depends on, you'd be surprised, school holidays and things like that really slow us down. You'd think it'd pick it up, it actually goes the other way around. But roughly speaking, we deal with, if you include the hospital stalls, it's probably about 1,600 people a week.
oh wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of picked up a lot when we include the hospital stalls. I think before the hospital stalls, we were looking at around 700 people a week.
And do you have to deal with much waste, or how have you got that nailed down and about the?
We are slowly figuring out the waste. Currently, the waste we do have, we tend to, because we only run Monday to Friday, basically, if I've got anything left on a Friday, I donate it. It goes to food banks, it goes to community centres, it goes to schools. We are looking at finding a way to turn it around and turn it into like jams and chutneys that people might be interested in having, just to try and go absolute zero. But for now, we're happy donating it on.
Yeah. And then what was I going to say? Yeah, we've had this conversation internally so much about how amazing it would be to have a vehicle, but we always fall down on the on costs, the MOT, the insurance. Like you said, you covered the fuel with some with through sales. How do you sustain that? Is it through your Alchemic Kitchen partnership and things like that? Is it funding through them?
Mainly, yes, it is. It's very fund based. It's
Yeah.
You've got to get like consistent funding, but yeah, the MOTs and all the services and all the issues with the buses, generally speaking, is where it becomes difficult, and you rely on funding, because we don't want to try and put all the cost onto like the customers essentially.
Yeah.
So on certain items, if like super seasonal, we can try and make money that way, but we don't want to boost the prices just to, which is a difficult one. We're trying to figure out the in between.
Yeah. Yeah. So and just to dig into that funding aspect, say you're going for year-on-year funding, and then your exhaust falls out off the bus or something like that. How do you factor in those things through funding?
Yeah, so that was one of the key aspects of having the second bus, because they did have an issue in the past. I am fairly new to this. I've only been here for 4 months. But one of the aspects they had in the past was the bus goes down for a week and then everything stops. So to avoid that, they had to look at getting funding for an extra bus, which I believe they got through a lottery funding. And that gives time to get everyone sorted and potentially look at funding. But during part of Alchemic Kitchen, there is a funder who is basically consistently looking at getting funding in to try and keep the buses going.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is a key part of it is the bus running. But I had a call last week actually with a guy from Sheffield, and he was much more interested in the stall aspect, because you can more or less fit the stall into a small van, which is much easier to run and much cheaper. So that's one of the main things. And you don't do it out of the van. You just take 2 trestle tables, a tablecloth, and you set up on there. And we currently set up like 8-hour days, and they are very popular, and it makes you very mobile.
Yeah.
You also don't have the restrictions that a bus has, because buses are quite large. So the roads themselves and where you're going to stop becomes an issue. I believe in Wales you have a 10-minute rule, which makes it difficult to stop and start. But that's just what I've been told from somebody else asking me from Wales. I was at a conference the other week.
I'm not familiar. Anyone else know about a 10-minute rule on the cuff? No, I've not heard that.
Down in Penarth, they told me it was a 10-minute rule where if you stopped, you had to go within 10 minutes. And that was a loophole they had to try and jump.
Yeah, I think they're probably a bit stricter in the big, in the valleys, we're probably a bit more chilled about that sort of thing. Yeah, funnily enough, we did something similar last financial year with Flying Start, so our equivalent children's centres, and Emma's on the call here, where we set up fruit and veg stalls with our underspend for our fruit and veg voucher project, and that sort of had a similar sort of feedback, I think, Emma, that it was a really appreciated way to access fruit and veg in these children's centres where you could have a stall.
It definitely was. The parents, it was just so accessible for them, and they're not sort of going out and directly asking them. They're just coming in saying, "No, I want to get some fruit." Fine, and it's quite nice for them to just do that. They trust us all in the hubs as well, because they work alongside us every day anyway. It just really worked. It'd be really good if we could get that up and running again at some point.
Yeah, it's just that model was on a donation pay what you can sort
Yeah.
of thing. Whereas, so yeah, you're able to wash your face, so to speak, with by charging a costed price, Matthew, through your wholesalers. Does anybody have any extra questions for Matthew that we haven't covered? Joel, you got a hand up? Go for it.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Matthew. That's really interesting. I was just wondering if you were to cost it, the whole kind of operation in terms of, like we said, the fuel, the MOT, the repairs, kind of on average a year, what kind of figure would you be looking at in terms of a grant?
In terms of a grant, so obviously you'd have to purchase the bus or van itself, which you're looking, if you're going, you can get a decent used one. I think our last bus cost us around 14,000. That has the bus itself. And just based off the repairs I've had to do this year on my buses, I would say you're looking at like an extra 5, because obviously it's a lot of use on these buses. So just the repairs and the services, you're already up to what, 18 grand. And then fuel, I probably spend £150 a week. So, yeah.
And then in terms of the drivers and stuff, the drivers are all volunteers, is that right?
No, our drivers are paid and funded.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the difficult aspect of it. Funding is generally needed for our particular service, which is something we are trying to get away from. That was kind of the idea behind the hospital stalls, because they are cheaper to run, which means we can then charge the same price we charge on the bus, but it doesn't cost us as much. So we're going to try and make it sustainable through that aspect, but it's going to take a bit of time though.
Great, thanks, Matthew.
Real. Anybody else want to jump in with anything? Just one last one. A theme that's popped up with the other presentations we've had is capturing the voice of the customer or service user or participant, and that. Are you doing any work in the community beyond like selling food, or do you capture people's voices or surveys or things like that, or things around that?
We have one currently running that is going to gather data and will be published on the Queen and Green's website. We don't currently have the day it's going to be published, but the Sustain one, the Bridging the Gap report, has a lot of customer feedback on. So if anybody wants to see it, it's the Sustain Bridging the Gap Queen of Greens.
Well, thank you. Once I work out how to wrangle this Teams recording, I will be sending out a newsletter with some of these links. So yeah, if you haven't signed up to our newsletter, please do so for the best way to access what we've been talking about. But if not, just send me an email and I can directly send it to you. Brill, thank you very much to all the speakers today. I'll just open it up to the floor. We've got a few minutes left. If there's any other business, does anybody want to raise anything that they want to talk about? David?
Yeah, thanks, everyone. So I'll be very, very quick because I've just had a pop-up saying I need to go and speak to a chair of a scrutiny, and she's just started the meeting, but it's in 3 minutes. So I'll be quick. I was just going to say a little thing about which some of you will know, council officers and some of the partners will know about, obviously some of the Trailblazer funding that has come to Plain Gwent from Welsh Government that focuses on engaging and supporting economically inactive people, particularly with focus on those who are not in education or training, have a health condition, long-term sickness, or have a caring responsibility. And there's lots of little projects going on. I can't remember the exact number, but quite a few, sort of 15 to 20 little projects going on across the borough that specifically involve that, which some of you will be aware of, that are doing things with people who are economically inactive or at risk of becoming economically inactive, in terms of offering skills and qualifications and job opportunities and things like that. But it was just to say that because obviously a lot of the users who are accessing food aid in the borough are going to be either economically inactive or at risk of, and in the areas of the borough that have got the highest levels of inactivity. We are going to work with those projects on trying to do, first of all, just something with them around the community food strategy and, you know, the food partnerships approach to encouraging access to affordable food through, you know, cash first approaches, resilient food, local, healthy, sustainable food provision, because although they're a lot of skills projects, obviously some of it does involve some food provision as well. So we want to obviously try and embed the, you know, food resilience and sustainable food and accessibility principles across those as well. But I think there's probably something for us to do with the food aid providers after that as well, about potentially signposting, you know, with those people that are using pantries or parcel services or whatever, who are, especially in the areas that we know are highest of economic inactivity. We don't have to be too, you know, strict on data and making sure that it's only people who are officially inactive, that sort of thing, because the likelihood is people in a lot of the areas in Blaenau Gwent are accessing those services are going to be, I said, either in it or at risk. So yeah, we want to do a bit of work on trying to signpost as much as possible to them, bring those people out of the you know, the situation that they're in, and for anyone in the community groups and delivery space left on the call as well, we want to work with you on maybe helping you potentially access some of that funding, if there's anything new and innovative and you're not already involved in it already, that is potentially available to support people in your local community who are either economically inactive or at risk, or that we're working with communities where the levels are highest. But the key thing with Trailblazers is it's got to be something new and innovative, not before. So yeah, we'll happy to work with you on that. And I do need to jump off right now, but Susan and Owain are on the call as well, who we can speak to you in more detail about that afterwards.
Well, thank you.
All right,
David.
thank you.
Yeah, and that's us to time, I'm afraid. Again, thanks again for all the speakers. And yeah, really interesting session from a range of people with doing some incredible projects and work all across the country. So appreciate everyone joining during this warm weather. So going off and have a drink or an iced coffee as you wish. And I will send more information after this. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Ta-ra,
Bye.
bye.
Bye.